The roots of the Progressive Era reforms began many years earlier. For over 80 years, presidents and federal politicians had rewarded their supporters with lucrative government jobs. It was called patronage, or the spoils system, from an old war slogan. Following the Civil War and Reconstruction, the American public grew increasingly disgusted with government corruption and favoritism. Some members of the Republican Party began a reform movement. Nicknamed mugwumps, they were influential Republicans who refused to support their party's presidential candidate, who they believed opposed reform. With the assassination of President James Garfield in 1881 by Charles Guiteau, whom he had refused to hire for a government position, the outcry for an end to patronage reached a crescendo. Now President Charles A. Arthur convinced Congress to pass the Pendleton Act, establishing a federal civil service. Federal workers would now be hired based on competitive exams rather than political influence. Slowly, civil service regulations were expanded to almost all government jobs. The mugwump concept of an honest government based on merit laid the groundwork for progressive reform, as did two other political groups, the populists and the socialists. After the Civil War, many Americans returned to or began farming. But over the next decades, there was an overproduction of farm goods. With more supply than demand, prices plummeted lower and lower. At the same time, the cost of seed, fertilizer, and railroad transportation increased, leaving more and more farmers little money to support their families and still pay their debts to bankers. In protest, farmers began to organize political parties. Of them, the Populist Party emerged as the most powerful. The Populists supported an income tax based on earnings to support the government, rather than the tariffs then charged to farmers and businesses. They demanded a shorter workday, government loans to farmers, the direct election of state senators, secret ballot voting, and other election reforms. But Republican William McKinley defeated the populist-supported presidential candidate, Democrat William Jennings Bryan, in 1896, and the Populist Party, if not its causes, faded. By 1900, another political movement emerged, demanding even more radical change, an end to capitalism itself. Eugene V. Debs was one of the founders of this new political force, the Socialists. Socialists felt that the industrial age and its capitalist culture was responsible for the wide disparity between the handful of rich and the working poor of America. Debs's proposed solution was to eliminate private ownership. Many middle and upper-class Americans disagreed with the socialists. They too felt that big business was out of control and American workers were being taken advantage of. These progressives felt they could improve capitalism by making government more responsive to social inequities. Progressives wanted instead to reform government and business, ensuring decent working conditions and wages and fair governmental rule.